Hey guys, Pixel here, to give you a quick review of the Steam Deck. I know before I bought the deck, my biggest question was, how is the software, and is the hardware more powerful than your off-the-shelf Ryzen-based laptop? So that's the two areas of focus of this video. Join me as I talk about SteamOS and all the games that I've played. Software first. To be completely honest with you, I was far more impressed with SteamOS than I thought I would be. Before I got the deck, I was thinking of getting the Iron Neo because it was a Windows first machine. The two things I was worried about is the performance of Proton and the game compatibility via Proton, since in the past, running games on Linux on my Intel iGPU and Nvidia GPU didn't always end up in comparable results to Windows, even on native binaries. So I'll get onto that in just a second with the deck. One of the great things about SteamOS is that you get the performance of Windows without the annoyances. Running Windows from a microSD card causes a bottleneck that makes it feel like you're using it with a hard drive. It generally just doesn't feel as fast as a Windows laptop with an NVMe drive. And you don't have to worry about random updates, the hibernation file taking up a big chunk of your storage, etc, etc with SteamOS. The other great thing is the features you have to get the most out of the deck's battery life and stabilize performance, like a forced FPS cap per game and being able to run the display down to 40Hz to reduce tearing and duplicate frames. You also can use FSR to gain extra FPS by lowering the in-game resolution and letting the system sharpen the screen to compensate. In terms of the battery, well, playing Test Drive Limit 2, which I can't force any sort of VSync or cap in, causes the battery life to approximately last about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, according to the OS estimates. While with emulating the PS2, the fan was completely off and the battery life was reported to be over 5 hours long. So yeah, the battery life really depends on how graphically heavy the game is, and more settings you have chosen both in-game and in the OS to put less strain on the APU. And also, talking about the fan, it sounds like a regular laptop fan. It's not too loud and it's not too whiny, and if you're used to laptop fans, you'll be used to the Steam Deck's fan. So in terms of game compatibility, all games that I've tried on SteamOS worked, except for two. These were Crash Time Free and Crash Day. Thanks to the lovely Snake Games Discord server, I fixed Crash Time Free. It was a proprietary Windows codec problem, while Crash Day works only if you don't try changing any of the settings, and also the music doesn't work, likely for the same reason as Crash Time. In terms of games that partially ran, BeamNG has a tendency to freeze the deck on the Italy map and needs to be run on Proton Experimental to fix the black textures, but the performance is great. Playing around, I have found that you can get away with the high settings as there's a tiny bit of headroom when in normal settings with the GPU. The game still runs above 30 FPS and usually sits just below 50. This is however no anti-aliasing and reflections. My laptop on the other hand, to get to that 35-40 FPS mark does need to be on normal settings at 720p. Trailout, an incredible game that I'll be reviewing on Missing Pixel later on, has a tendency to freeze the deck when in DirectX 12 mode. Thankfully the game gets constant updates, and with one update, the DX11 performance has been improved and is more or less on par with the X12. But if you still want to squeeze every single frame out of the game, the X12 is the way to go. Anyway, back to the game. On my Ryzen laptop, having the game on medium settings at 720p resulted in 30 FPS gameplay, but that's on a simple map, and when there was any action on screen, like drivers crashing into each other, the frame rate would dip into the teens, while on the deck, with a mixture of low and high settings at 720p, the frame rate fluctuates between 25 FPS to low 40s at the same resolution. Here, I usually have the game capped to 30 FPS for more stability. One thing I noticed though, is that the input latency seems higher on my laptop than the deck. I wonder if SteamOS is doing something to compensate for the latency you get at lower frame rates. The Coin Game, a fun indie game where you get to visit virtual amusement parks, the Chuck E. Cheese kind, runs the same on the deck as on my laptop, with the only difference being the laptop is running at 1080p instead of 720p. The beautiful thing is that I can install non-Steam games on the deck with Lutris. Here's Test Drive Limit 2, once again, playing just fine, minus some graphical issues. On Windows, the game will blue screen the system, possibly due to Securom, but could have also been a general driver issue. Games that are in the Lutris library can sometimes be a bit harder to run out of the box, and I keep getting a code 256 error every time I try to install a game for the first time, but generally all of the popular titles from the past are on here, and Lutris, while being a desktop program, will put shortcuts into SteamOS. I also have a companion video on Missing Pixel where I try out some old racing games on the deck via Windows, and the great thing is that the controls worked with every game tested, though you do need to go into big picture mode to change configuration settings and put each game into Steam. It's nice that Valve has made sure that Steam on Windows has hardware support for the deck, something they didn't need to do since it's an unsupported platform. One more thing about the hardware, the speakers are so good, they get loud, and because the deck is a long machine, the stereo separation is fantastic. Also no doubt thanks to the speakers being front facing. Also, I've had some strange issues with recording via HDMI. As you can see, the deck kept giving me no signal messages. Maybe this had something to do with it being on low battery, or maybe the game was pushing it too much. This is actually a common enough problem that there are a lot of Reddit threads about it. I've also tried emulation. First of all, wow, it was stupidly simple to set up EmuDeck. You can have each individual game in your SteamOS library, but I decided to just have a shortcut to Emulation Station, which looks beautiful and everything worked out of the box, even having some nice artwork around the borders on certain emulators through RetroArch. Even better, some emulators have filters set up automatically. The GBA one looks absolutely incredible. I absolutely adore the CRT one as well. It's so cool to see how these old consoles like the PS1 or Mega Drive made use of how the CRT displayed the image to blend pixels in order to create smooth gradients. As a result, games don't look blocky. But in case you're not a fan of the blur and the vignette, the realistic scanline filter also helps to make games look less blocky without being as much of a visual distraction. EmuDeck configures each emulator to look in a specific directory on your SD card for games. Rendering settings also get taken care of, and so do the controls. It is so simple to get up and running, and games are already set up to look and run their best. PS2 emulation was the thing I was most excited about, since my PS2's laser has hit the dust a long time ago, and being able to play in bed would be so nice. And yep, the performance was fantastic, and the deck didn't break a sweat. Xbox 360 emulation was a bit more hit and miss due to the work in progress nature of the Xbox 360 emulator. TDU2 ran for a few minutes before crashing, and PGR4 corrupted the save on reboot, but the former ran at full speed, and the latter did run but with quite a lot of stutter. Since I had no problems running PGR4 performance-wise on my laptop, I think the weaker CPU of the deck shows here. Forza Horizon had missing ground textures and would crash before getting to the festival. That being said, others have had much better luck with these sorts of emulators, and the deck is the closest and cheapest handheld device on the market that is able to emulate every console that has an emulator, including the Wii U and Switch. Obviously you won't be playing Xbox One games on the handheld unless you use xCloud, but you know what I mean. I also tried Citra, which ran utterly terrible on my laptop for seemingly no reason, even at native resolution of the 3DS, while I had no issues on the deck whatsoever. I think that's all there is to say about the deck for now. It is an incredibly versatile system. I mean, what other handheld will let you plug in a CD drive to install games from, and go into a full KDE desktop environment to do whatever your heart desires? SteamOS has also finally added an option to choose resolution via HDMI, so my only complaint left is the lack of video recording capabilities, which Valve may add in a future date. Otherwise you'll have to boot into desktop mode and record via OBS. The deck does the main thing I wanted it to, which is to play games both on my Steam library and outside of it, and it does so impressively well. It really exceeded my expectations. I guess the next thing left is to finish installing my old Windows games via Lutris to see which ones work and which ones don't. That'll probably be a missing pixel video in case you guys want to see that, so make sure to subscribe, and also maybe try to get Windows 90X era games running. Otherwise, that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next one.